The night my brother called me, his voice was shaking, and by morning he was gone. What he told me in those final hours set me on a 2-year path of uncovering lies, betrayal, and a revenge so deep it would destroy everything in its path. Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by again. I got something new to share, so let's dive right in. Ethan had been wrestling with migraines for as long as he could remember, not just the mild kind you push through, but the brutal, crippling attacks that could drop him to his knees. His last episode had been over a year ago, and he had treasured every single day since, grateful for the gift of a clear head. Trying to explain that kind of pain to someone who's never gone through it felt almost pointless. The misery was beyond words, the kind of relentless agony that could make a person desperate just to make it stop. These migraines didn't come often anymore, but Ethan knew better than to shrug off the warning signs when they did. At 35, he was in great shape, broad-shouldered, solid muscle from years of working out, but even he knew when it was time to respect his limits. That Wednesday morning, the signs came creeping back. First, his vision blurred and doubled. Then came the dizziness, followed by the dull, heavy pulse at his temples, an old, unwelcome friend. He knew what was coming and wasn't about to gamble with his safety. Instead of driving himself, he called a cab to take him home. Before leaving the office, he asked his secretary to clear the rest of his schedule. Sometimes these headaches could cling to him for days, even an entire week, and he wasn't willing to risk it getting worse. Back at the house, Ethan downed 2 Depot tablets, grabbed the ice pack from the freezer, and settled into his favorite overstuffed chair in the living room, the one just outside the master bedroom that he reserved for times like this. The chair had practically become his war bunker against migraines. He pressed the ice pack firmly to his forehead and shut his eyes, trying to ride the waves of pain with slow breathing and meditation. The throbbing was already building into something fiercer, but he told himself it might still ease up in a few hours if he stayed calm. He had just begun to sink deeper into that meditative state when faint noises reached his ears from downstairs. He figured it must be his wife, Megan. She'd always been good about giving him his space when one of these headaches hit. What she didn't know, though, was that his car wasn't parked in the driveway. She had no reason at all to think he was home this early. Ethan usually didn't get home until 6 in the evening, so it never crossed his mind that anything unusual might be happening. He stayed perfectly still, figuring the noise downstairs was nothing to worry about, until a sound froze him in place. A man's voice. His breath caught mid-inhale. Slowly he opened his eyes, careful not to move too quickly. From where he sat, he could just see Megan, his wife, walking up the stairs, and beside her was a man Ethan didn't recognize. Both of them were heading straight toward the master bedroom. He stayed silent, straining to hear every sound. Megan was speaking into her phone, her voice playful, even giggling. "Oh, Rachel. I'm here with him now. Thanks for setting this up." She paused, listening. "I hope it turns out as well as yours did last week. He'll call you tomorrow so you two can plan another one. I'll give you all the details later. Gotta go." Ethan's stomach twisted. Rachel. His mind instantly connected the name. Rachel was married to his brother, David. The realization slammed into him with brutal force. Megan was cheating on him and Rachel had been the one to arrange it. The ache in his skull was nothing compared to the crushing pain in his chest. He stayed frozen where he was, trying to breathe through the sudden chaos in his head. From his hidden spot, he could hear them in the bedroom. The man's voice was warm with flattery, telling Megan how stunning she looked. Megan laughed softly, then whispered something about how much she appreciated their friendship, and how much she enjoyed the way he took care of things. Ethan felt heat rising through his body. His hands started trembling, not from the migraine but from the rage and betrayal that now consumed him. His vision blurred, not from the headache but from tears he refused to let fall. He had loved Megan with every ounce of himself. For a brief moment he thought about avoiding the confrontation altogether, locking himself in the guest room, waiting for them to be gone. But the longer he listened, the more the fire inside him grew. Then came the sounds that broke what little restraint he had left, the rustle of clothing hitting the floor, followed by the groan of the mattress as the stranger climbed onto the bed they once shared. Ethan's fists tightened until his knuckles ached. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Slowly, carefully, he rose from his chair. His movements were controlled, deliberate, and silent. Whatever small noises he made were masked entirely by what was happening in the bedroom. Ethan steadied himself, forcing his body to stop shaking. He moved toward the nightstand, pulling open the drawer with slow precision. Inside was his Glock G45, a gun he rarely touched but had kept there for years. His fingers closed around the grip, the cool metal grounding him for a brief moment in the chaos. He stepped forward into the doorway. Megan's head snapped toward him, her eyes going wide. A gasp escaped her lips as she scrambled, pushing the man beside her away in a frantic motion. But the stranger, Ethan now had a name for him, Ryan, didn't seem to grasp the danger, at least not until it was far too late. Ethan raised the gun, pressing the barrel to Ryan's left temple. Without a word he squeezed the trigger. The sound was deafening in the small room. Ryan's body slumped instantly, collapsing against Megan with a dead weight that made her shriek. She shoved him aside, his lifeless form rolling onto the sheets. Her gaze shot back to Ethan and she froze. His cheeks were wet with tears. He looked at her as though he were staring at a stranger who had burned his entire world to ash. "I gave you my heart, my life," he whispered, his voice breaking, "and you destroyed all of it." The second shot cracked through the air. Megan fell, her blood seeping into the expensive silk sheets they had once chosen together, sheets that had witnessed 1,000 nights of shared dreams and now bore the stain of betrayal. Ethan stood there, his chest rising and falling in heavy, uneven breaths. The weight of what he had just done began to crash down on him, pressing into his bones. He took one long, shuddering inhale, then reached for his phone. He dialed his younger brother, David. "Hey man, what's up?" David's voice was casual, friendly, and it felt like a blade twisting into Ethan's gut. "Just listen," Ethan said, his tone eerily steady. "I came home and found Megan with Ryan, in our bed. She was on the phone with Rachel. Rachel set it up. You need to watch her." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Ethan, what are you saying?" David's voice was trembling. "I took care of them," Ethan replied slowly. "You heard me. Look into Rachel. I love you, brother." "I'm sorry." Before David could speak again, Ethan hung up. He then dialed 911, calmly reported the incident, gave them his address and set the phone down on the nightstand. He closed his eyes, the gun still in his hand, and leaned his head back against the wall. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found him in the same spot, but no longer breathing. The Glock remained clutched in his hand. "My name is David and Ethan was my older brother. It's been a year since that night and I still wake up feeling like half of me is missing. He wasn't just my brother, he was my closest friend. Losing him left a hole that nothing can fill." The whole town turned against Megan after her death, condemning her for what she had done. But their hatred didn't bring my brother back. It didn't quiet the nightmares. It didn't stop the ache that lives in my chest every day. And the worst part is, I couldn't shake Ethan's last words to me. He had been certain that Rachel played a role in Megan's affair. And if she had been involved in something that cruel, what else could she be hiding? The thought wormed its way into my mind and refused to leave. I became obsessed. Paranoia doesn't just creep in, it builds a home. Before long, I had hired one of the best security firms in the state to wire my house with hidden cameras and microphones. Every room, every hallway, even the backyard, all under my watch. I listened in on every phone call, read every message, studied every interaction. 2 weeks later I got my answer. Rachel was cheating. Her lover? Jared Matthews, the assistant tennis coach who had conveniently been promoted to head coach after Ryan's sudden death. The betrayal didn't just hurt, it rotted me from the inside out. For a year I quietly gathered evidence. I thought the hardest part would be seeing the images on screen, her hands on him, their lips meeting, but I was wrong. The real damage came from hearing her words. One night, Jared asked her softly, "Why do you even stay with him?" Rachel let out a little sigh. "He's grieving. I can't walk away now. Besides, I don't need that from him. I have you." Those words replayed in my head like a broken record, each repetition stirring the rage a little deeper. Then one day an opportunity practically fell into my lap, an invitation to a banquet. I started to see how I could turn this into something more. I began to map out every detail, making sure Rachel would have all the rope she needed to hang herself. And right on cue, the day after the banquet, she called Jared with excitement in her voice. She told him she had good news, she could get away for a few days. She talked him into booking a hotel in Orlando for 3 nights, promising to make it worth his while. He didn't hesitate. Over the next week, they gushed to each other about the trip. Rachel wanted to make it feel like a honeymoon, calling it their 3-day wedding. She even suggested they buy a new engagement ring and book the most expensive honeymoon suite in the hotel. In one of her texts, she told him she wished it were real, that he was truly her husband. Reading those words didn't just make me angry. It fanned the flames of something darker. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was ready. I was going to savor every second of watching Rachel's world collapse. She had been spending extra hours at the gym lately, no doubt trying to fine-tune her body for Jared. But all I could see was the emptiness behind her smile. She wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. She was a stranger wearing my wife's face. For 3 days she would play bride to another man, living out her fantasy of a romantic honeymoon. I watched with detached fascination as she shopped for the trip. Silky lingerie, tiny bikinis, dresses that clung to every curve. She never once put that kind of effort into us. It was almost funny, in a bitter way, how much she was willing to give to him when she had long stopped giving anything to me. By then, any scraps of love I had for her were gone. Her betrayal had drained the last drop of affection from my heart. On the morning they were leaving, I called her, knowing full well she wouldn't pick up. As expected, her voicemail clicked on. I left a short message telling her I loved her and would see her in 10 days. An hour later she called me back. Her voice was warm, almost too warm, dripping with the kind of sweetness people put on when they're hiding something. "I love you," she said softly. "The kids are staying at their friend's place tonight. I'll order pizza when they get home and we'll have a movie night. I miss you already." Her ability to lie without hesitation, without even a flicker of guilt, stunned me. When I arrived at the hotel, I handed my keys to the valet and strolled to the reception desk, acting like any ordinary guest. "Has Mr. and Mrs. Matthews checked in yet?" I asked casually, masking the tightness in my chest. The receptionist smiled politely. "Yes, they arrived yesterday. They're in the honeymoon suite." My jaw tightened, but I forced my voice to stay level. I stepped away and made a quick call to the hotel's restaurant. Their reservation was confirmed for 6 p.m., perfect. That evening, I shadowed them from a distance, watching as they dined. Rachel's eyes sparkled as she leaned toward Jared, her laugh ringing across the room in a way I hadn't heard in years. Every gesture, every smile between them was a dagger. When they finished their meal and started toward the exit, I positioned myself at just the right spot. As they rounded the corner, I stepped forward and accidentally bumped into Jared, nearly knocking him off balance. "Oh man, I'm so sorry," I said, steadying him with one hand while forcing a friendly smile. "I'm so sorry," I said, stepping back, and then I saw her. Rachel. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide in sheer panic. She looked like she wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "Rachel?" I let my eyebrows lift in feigned surprise. "What are you doing here?" Jared frowned, glancing between us, still clearly not connecting the dots. I let my eyes travel over Rachel slowly, deliberately, the short, low-cut dress, sheer stockings, impossibly high heels, flawless makeup. She had never put in this much effort for me, not once in all our years together. She stammered, trying to compose herself. "Why, you're supposed to be in Jacksonville." "Plans changed," I said evenly. "I thought you were staying home with the kids." That flicker of fear in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She tried to guide me away, her voice low. Let's talk in the lobby." But I wasn't going to make this easy. "Who's this guy?" I asked, nodding toward Jared. "And why are you dressed like that?" Her fingers tightened around my arm. "Please, let's just talk in private." I followed her toward the lobby, my tone calm but edged with steel. "I just want to understand something. You told me you'd be home with the kids. But instead you're here, dressed like this, with him?" Then I turned to Jared, my expression hardening. "Who are you?" He smirked, leaning back slightly as if that would make him seem relaxed. "Hey man, relax. It's not what you think. There's an awards banquet, and Rachel was nice enough to accompany me, as a friend." "A friend?" I repeated with a scoff. "So you two aren't staying here together?" They both dropped their eyes to the floor. My gaze swung back to Rachel, my voice laced with mock curiosity. "Where's your wedding ring?" Her hand jerked to her chest as if she could hide it, but the damage was done. Her ring was gone. In its place was a plain gold band. A new ring. A ring for her fake honeymoon. "You checked in as Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, didn't you?" I asked. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "It's not what you think. I love you." I leaned closer, my voice slicing through her sobs. "Are you sleeping with him?" She faltered, then whispered, "Yes." That single word hit me like a shot of adrenaline. Satisfaction burned in my chest, but I wasn't finished. "Did you pretend to be his wife?" "It wasn't real," she choked out. "It didn't mean anything." "Answer the question, Rachel. Did you check into this hotel as his wife?" Her voice cracked as she admitted it. "Yes." The word hung between us, heavy and final, like a verdict being read. I straightened slowly, my eyes never leaving hers, and stepped back. "I see," I said evenly. "Well, I won't keep you. Enjoy your honeymoon." I turned on my heel and started toward the exit. "Wait." Rachel lunged forward, grabbing at my arm. "I don't want a divorce. You're my husband. I love you. I stopped just long enough to face her one final time. No, Rachel, you loved the idea of me. You loved the comfort, the safety I provided. But you didn't love me. Not enough to stay faithful. Not enough to respect what we had. Her knees buckled and she dropped to the floor, sobbing, but I was already stepping away. She had wanted a fantasy honeymoon. Now she could wake up in the nightmare of reality. I asked her flatly, "Tell me why I should accept my wife sleeping with another man and pretending to be his wife." Through gasping breaths, she pleaded, insisting it was supposed to be just a few days, something she needed to feel close again. She swore she didn't love Jared, that she only loved me. "So I'm supposed to be okay?" I asked, my voice low, "with you sleeping with another man, just for a little fun?" Her sobs grew louder, her hands covering her face as the truth pressed down on her. She tried to find the words, but there was nothing left to say. All she could do was beg for my understanding, apologizing over and over, desperately clinging to the idea that somehow we could recover from this. She admitted it sounded bad, looked bad, but insisted we could overcome it together. She was grasping at straws, desperate to keep a marriage she had already destroyed. The silence between us felt heavy enough to crush the air from the room. That's when Jared decided to speak. "Hey man, back off," he said, his tone sharp with annoyance. "Can't you see how upset she is?" I turned toward him slowly, my eyes cold and dead. "Shut your mouth and get out of my sight. You've already wrecked my marriage, that should be enough damage for one day." He didn't flinch. Instead he stood, rested his hand lightly on Rachel's shoulder and said calmly, "I'll be upstairs. Come up when you're done here." Rachel's face twisted with fury. She shoved his hand away as if it burned her skin. "Don't touch me," she snapped, her voice trembling. And that's when it hit me. The absurdity of it all. I couldn't stop the laugh that bubbled up from my chest, low, bitter, and humorless. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. She clearly wanted nothing more to do with her so-called lover, yet Jared stood there with that smug little grin, drinking in the chaos like it was fine wine. I looked at Rachel, still crumpled in the chair and crying, and let my voice drip with sarcasm. "Careful now, don't be rude to your new husband. I'd hate to think I'm interrupting your honeymoon. We both know this is what you wanted. You didn't want me. If you truly loved me, Rachel, you would never have done this." Jared eventually gave a small shrug and walked away, leaving us alone. She looked up at me with eyes so full of desperation it almost seemed rehearsed. I asked her straight out, "How long have you been with him?" She didn't even blink before lying. This was the first time. I stared at her in disbelief, marveling at how easily she could lie to my face after everything. So I pushed further. "Have you ever talked badly about me to him? Ever belittled me behind my back?" Again the same song and dance, another lie. She clung to that false narrative, telling me over and over that she loved me, that I was everything to her, urging me to forget this, to go home with her, to rebuild. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The speakers came to life, but I had already muted the video. I didn't want her distracted by anything but the words. The first recording played, her voice calm, almost casual, assuring someone not to worry about me because I was clueless. The second was colder, her saying our intimate moments were boring. The third wasn't even about me, it was her declaring her loyalty to another man. The fourth, almost matter-of-fact, said I was a good provider and father, but she'd never leave me for that reason alone. The fifth compared me unfavorably in bed to someone else. The sixth admired another man's ability to excite her in ways I never could. The seventh stripped away the last illusion. Her voice soft, almost tender, telling another man that her body and soul belonged to him entirely. And there were more. Over 50 more. Each one slicing into me like a blade, carving away whatever fragments of trust or love might have been left. As the recordings played on, her face shifted, from shock to sorrow, from indignation to devastation. The glimmer of charm that she usually wielded so effortlessly was gone. So was the manipulative spark in her eyes. There was nowhere left for her to run. She had destroyed our marriage piece by piece, and now, for the first time, she truly saw the wreckage she'd created, and that there would be no undoing it. I told Rachel it was over. Completely. No more lies, no more excuses, no more pretending. I had known about her affair for 2 years, 2 long years spent quietly collecting proof while she went on smiling to my face and sneaking behind my back. I told her about the night Ethan called me, just hours before he killed Megan and her lover. How he told me she had been in contact with Rachel, speaking openly about her attraction to another man. I had waited after that, waited to see if she would stop, if she would realize what she was throwing away. But she never did. I laid it out plainly. Her words had reduced me to nothing more than a wallet and a roof over her head, a safe option while she disrespected me in ways I wouldn't wish on anyone. Then I put all the evidence in front of her, the recorded calls, the messages, the screenshots, the confrontations. There was no space left for denial. And then I gave her a choice: sign the divorce papers quietly without a single fight, or I would send everything to her parents, our children, and anyone else who mattered in her world. I knew the kids were old enough to decide where they wanted to live, and I knew what they would choose after hearing the truth. I told Rachel that the worst part of this wasn't the cheating itself, it was that I had once loved her with every fiber of my being. I had envisioned growing old beside her, watching our family grow, holding her hand through the final years of our lives. When Ethan first warned me, I refused to believe it. I thought my brother was wrong. But the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, and when it did, it shattered my heart beyond repair. And then I told her the one thing I knew would echo in her mind for the rest of her life. We are never, ever, getting back together. I turned and walked out of that hotel, leaving her sobbing behind me. I drove home alone, feeling the weight of two funerals, one for my marriage and one for my brother. That night, I realized something I hadn't expected. Revenge doesn't bring peace. It just leaves you with the silence afterward. 5 years later, I met a woman in a small cafe. We grew close. She was kind, gentle, everything Rachel wasn't. But I never remarried. Some wounds just don't close. I knew I could never give my heart to another woman the way I once had. Trust like that doesn't grow back, not after what happened. I dated here and there, even found someone I cared for deeply, but marriage? That was off the table. We stayed close as friends, but I never again allowed myself to be that vulnerable. As for Rachel, life after our divorce was nothing short of ruin. Within months, the weight of her guilt, her public humiliation, and the collapse of her world pushed her into a full nervous breakdown. She spent an entire year in a psychiatric facility. When she finally returned, she was no longer welcome in our city. Everyone knew, the whispers about her role in Ethan and Megan's deaths, her betrayal of me, the countless lies, they spread like wildfire. She lost custody of our children, reduced to seeing them only on alternating weekends. 4 years she lived in a fog of depression, surviving off the divorce settlement and working as a secretary in a different city, far from the life she once knew. She began attending church, searching for redemption, but the truth was she never recovered from losing her family, or the love she once had but destroyed. And Jared? His fall came in a far more brutal fashion. One night, after leaving the home of yet another married mistress, he was jumped in a dark parking lot. A taser dropped him instantly. Then a blade sliced through both his Achilles tendons. His tennis career ended in that single moment. When the police questioned him, he offered nothing. But deep down he knew exactly who it was. He remembered the voice that had leaned close to his ear and whispered, just before disappearing into the darkness, "Stop seducing married women." That whisper was the last sound Jared ever heard from me. I left him there in the darkness, writhing on the pavement, his life's work and athletic future bleeding out through 2 small cuts that would never heal right. I didn't stick around to see who found him or how quickly the ambulance came. That part didn't matter. The damage was permanent. Some people might call it revenge. Some might call it justice. To me, it was neither, just the inevitable conclusion of a chain of betrayals that began years before, with Ethan's phone call and the truth I didn't want to believe. The aftermath was quiet in a way I can't describe. No parades, no victory. Just silence. Rachel lived out the rest of her days on the sidelines of her own life. She'd lost her family, her friends, her reputation. Even the church pews she sat in couldn't wash away what she'd done. She carried that weight until the day she died. As for me, I still wake up some nights thinking about Ethan, my brother, my best friend. I think about the night he called me, the pain in his voice, the love he still carried for a woman who had already destroyed him. I think about how that same poison found its way into my life. 5 years have passed and people still ask why I never remarried. The truth is, I learned the hard way that trust isn't something you can patch up with new paint. Once it's shattered, it's gone forever. I've made peace with living alone. Some scars just don't fade. It had been almost 8 years since I'd last seen Rachel. Time hadn't been kind to her. I was in another city for work, sitting in a small diner that smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs, when I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. "David?" I turned, and there she was, standing in the doorway, clutching a faded handbag, her hair streaked with gray, her shoulders hunched like the weight of the years had pressed her into a smaller version of herself. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her clothes were clean but cheap, The kind of outfit you buy on clearance because you have to, not because you want to. I didn't speak right away. I just looked at her. She walked over slowly as if approaching a stranger, not the man she'd once promised forever to. "It's been a long time," she said, her voice quieter now, almost brittle. "Not long enough," I replied, keeping my tone calm even. She sat across from me without asking. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around a cup of water the waitress had left on the table. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began, her eyes darting between mine and the tabletop. "For everything. I live with it every day. I lost my family, my home, you. And I know it's my fault." I let her words hang there for a moment. "You didn't just lose me, Rachel. You destroyed me. You destroyed Ethan. You destroyed yourself." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. I need you to know I've changed. I go to church, I volunteer, I cut her off. "You can't rewrite the past. You can't pray away what you did. Some things stay broken." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clatter of dishes and soft hum of conversation around us felt like another world entirely. Finally, I stood, dropping a few bills on the table. "Take care of yourself," I said. "But stay out of my life." Her lips parted like she wanted to speak again, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked out of that diner and never looked back. Sometimes closure isn't a warm hug or a shared tear. Sometimes it's simply the door closing one last time. It had been almost 8 years since I'd last seen Rachel. Life had gone on. I'd rebuilt in my own way, not with another marriage but with quiet routines, work, and a handful of people I could still trust. I never thought about seeing her again, until I did. I was out of town for work, eating a late breakfast in a small diner that smelled like burnt coffee and old grease. The bell above the door jingled and I heard a voice I recognized instantly. "David?" I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway clutching a worn handbag, her hair streaked with gray, her frame thinner than I remembered. The confident posture she once carried was gone. Her shoulders hunched, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Her clothes were clean but plain, the kind you buy out of necessity, not choice. I didn't speak. I just watched her. She walked toward my table, hesitating with each step, as though waiting for me to tell her to leave. "It's been a long time," she said softly. "Not long enough," I replied. She slid into the booth across from me without asking. Her hands trembled as she reached for the water glass in front of her. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I live with it every day. I lost my family, my home, you. And I know it's my fault." I stared at her for a moment before answering. "You didn't just lose me, Rachel. You destroyed me. You destroyed Ethan. And you destroyed yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. "I've changed," she said. "I go to church now, I volunteer. I'm trying to be better." I shook my head. "You can't rewrite the past. You can't pray away what you did. Some things stay broken." Silence stretched between us, heavy and unmoving. I could see her mouth start to form words she'd never get to say. I stood, dropped a few bills on the table and said, "Take care of yourself. But stay out of my life." I walked out of that diner, the cold morning air hitting my face like a final punctuation mark. I didn't look back and I didn't need to. Some doors once closed should never be opened again.